As folks are arriving, I want to welcome, if you want to turn on your camera, we'd love to see your face. If you're just listening, that's fine. And if you're willing, I'd love you guys to put in chat where you're calling in from, because I imagine we have quite a range. Amazing. I'm seeing all over the world. Israel, Amsterdam, Berlin, Seattle, Belgium, Chicago, Vienna, Maine. Thank you to anyone who stayed up late or got up early. You can see, I love that you need to chaperone your cat. Mine is sitting right next to the door right now. Great. So we'll go ahead and get started. Igor, is there anything you want to say before I hop in?
No, go ahead, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Okay. I am both excited and a little nervous with so many squares on the screen. But I'm excited to be covering this content because I'm a total communication nerd, and getting to teach on and transmit how we make better friends and connect better, have better conversations at the coffee shop and with our families is really the thing I'm passionate about. So I will start by telling you a little bit about me, and then we will get into the content. Let me figure out how to present. Technology is not my forte. All right. So this is the art of engaging conversations. And a little bit about me. I grew up in a pretty isolated environment, which is one reason I got so interested in communication. A kind of white picket fence sort of suburb in Pennsylvania where people moved to not interact with their neighbors. And I was even a little more down that road than usual. I read on average 5 fantasy books a week because there wasn't many people around to interact with. So I was just like, well, guess I don't need social skills. A picture of me in that ages, in case you're one books for friends, honestly. And it wasn't until I got to college that I was like, oh, people like human interaction. Is that a thing I should have maybe learned? uh, so I got lucky enough to fall into authentic relating practices, which are a form of communication games. When I was on a gap year between my junior and senior years of college, I was studying intentional living communities, co-ops and communes and such, how people live together. And I was really fascinated that someone had managed to simplify. The idea of authentic relating games is that there are set turns for when people talk and what skills we're practicing. So there's curiosity games, there's somatic awareness games, how do you focus attention on other people, when and how do you speak? And it was really a learning opportunity for me. Like, it gave me a safe container to practice social skills. And so I started teaching and practicing this anywhere that I could. When I joined it, there wasn't a training, there was just a little manual of games, and I helped found communities for this all over the world. And I've spent the last 13 years applying these tools anywhere that would let me practice my weird connection arts, from the training rooms of Google and Dell to the offices of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and Mind Valley, to the dusty deserts and fancy hotel rooms of Burning Man and Interfusion, the Zoom rooms of Rebel Wisdom, all over the place. And of course, countless homes and event spaces. I've worked with probably tens of thousands of students at this point. And over the years, I've winnowed down some tools that I think work the best for helping us form fast connections. And I want to teach them to you today. So I want to start by warming up with a little poll. And Igor, I'm wondering if you would be so kind as to launch that. If you were able to create it. If not, I can invite people to share in chat.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't create it. It's my bad.
Oh, that's okay.
But I can create it very quickly if you need it.
That's okay. Let me put this in chat. instead, and you guys can just read it and tell me what your answer is, and I'll read them out too. So the question is, how do you usually start a conversation with somebody new? Do you do small talk about casual topics? Do you ask questions to get to know them? Do you share something about yourself or your interests to start conversations? Do you bring up a current event? Or do you panic and forget how language works? Or F, other option. And fill in. Great, I'm seeing a whole range, honestly. Less bringing up a current event, lots of A's and B's, couple C's and D's, lots of E's, my people. Amazing. I'm actually seeing probably a majority of B's asking questions to get to know them, which bodes well for what we're going to be covering a lot in our conversation today. I'm liking this. Comment on the situation and follow up with a question. Follow their lead and wait for them to start. That's a good one. Small talk about things in the environment or small things you know about them. Get them to talk so I don't have to. Totally. Say hello. Good first one. All of the above depending on the person. Yeah, this varies wildly depending on the type of relationship and who you're talking to, right? So today we're kind of going to be focusing most on how do you have casual conversations, but these skills will be applicable to all different types of relationships. And at the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about a course that we're running that is a little more focused on how do you deepen current relationships, family, partners, such like that. Oh, I like this. Surprise them with something really unexpected and build on the interest. Yep, I have definitely done that. Okay, so thank you guys. So I'm going to give you some new tools to try to expand on whatever option you already do, give you some choice in the other ones, because I notice that many of us, including me early on, learned social skills like a hammer that we try on every nail. We're like, okay, I learned that we should start with questions. And I am now going to do that in every conversation. And the specific sort of questions that I found work best, like questions about somebody's work. Or I've learned that I should start by talking about something that I'm interested in, or I learned that I should start by giving a compliment. And then that becomes our norm, right? It's really hard to break out of. And I want you guys to have a Swiss Army knife of different options that you can use depending on the situation. Oh, okay. I want to ask, oh yeah, this is an example of me actually getting to a point where I could do facilitation and a little more socializing and playing with human interaction instead of just being frozen all the time. This was a conference I ran called the Living Room. I want to ask one more question of you guys before we get started. And again, put your answers in chat so that I get an idea of what you guys are working with. And the question is, when do you get disengaged? What makes you totally check out of a conversation? What is it that other people do or that you do that you're like, I don't know how to stay engaged in this. I'm just not interested anymore. Politics, when someone talks for too long, being talked at, when someone is only talking about themselves, small talk, harassment, when the other person gives one word answers, monologuing. So we've got a lot of like, somebody just keeps talking. Complaining, when it's not a back and forth. I'm reading some of these aloud, by the way, for the recording, and because it's probably hard to track all of them. If they seem distracted, small talk. One of the things we're really going to be covering today is how do you turn small talk into deep talk? And how do you guide conversations so you're not just listening to a monologue? Seeing asking too many specific questions about me and my life. Yeah, how do you turn that around? talking about sports, uncompromising political views, one-sided conversation. Okay, these are great. I would encourage y'all to, as you hear me sharing the skills that I'm about to in this webinar, think about where you could apply these to the conversations that frustrate you. I notice learning is best whenever I have a model in mind that I'm trying to apply skills to. It makes it a little bit more practical. All right, I'm still seeing posts, but this is great. So let's move on to some skills. We're primarily going to cover 3 things today. How do you deepen questions? How do you follow aliveness? And how do you get comfortable with the fact that this is kind of conversational control? So we'll talk a little bit about the ethicality of controlling conversations. All right. I want to ask you guys, of this list, which list of questions would you find most interesting to ask about? Seeing almost all 2s. What are you passionate about with a lot of exclamation points too? 2, but I'd feel embarrassed to ask. Very nice. 1, as 2 of the ones in 2 seem a little bit invasive. Nice. 2, but 1 seems a lot safer. 1, because 2 scares me. The setting is important here. Yeah, very nice. The second would be most interesting after I establish rapport. 2, with the exception of the dad one, that's a can of worms. Yep. Okay. So this was a little bit of a trick question because oftentimes we actually have to start with 1 on this list. We can't jump straight into the 2 where we get something like this. Like, why did you just start by asking me about my relationship with my dad? Like, I just sat down. So the goal of questions is not to go to the ultimate deep end really quickly. It's to warm people up, to develop rapport and a relationship before you go deeper, to not cannonball into the deep end. So to get the depth you want, you really have to start shallow and guide deeper into the conversation. And we'll talk in a minute about ways to do that, the 70-30 rule and following the thread in a topic. This is one way that I maybe use some questions to go deeper. So I'll start with something like, what do you do? And then how did you get into that? What interested you about it? And then after we're already talking back and forth, I might go a little spicier, like, what's something that really is difficult for you in your work? Or what's something that you love about doing this job? And then if I really want to go to the end of it, I could say something like, well, what do you really want to do with your life? Like if you had any choice, especially if they're talking about disliking it a little bit or having some difficulty. But I'm starting by finding out the logistical information before I go to the emotional. I really want to make sure that I'm on the same page as this person. As we'll talk about a little bit later, I want to notice their aliveness. I want to notice the moments where they are lighting up or shutting down and be kind of following that. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit of a demonstration with my co-conspirator, Sarah Jack. And what I'd really like you guys to do is while we're doing this, watch and notice some of the things that I'm doing in conversation and what the effects are. And you can comment them in chat and we'll do a little bit of a discussion afterwards. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. You want to do a demo with me?
I do want to do a demo with you. Thank you.
Great. So the context of this is, say a friend of ours introduced us and said, hey, I think you 2 would really like each other. You should hop on a Zoom.
Great.
Cool. And our friend's name is Rebecca.
Okay. Wonderful.
Yeah. All right. Sarah on Sarah action.
Let's go.
So, hey, Sarah Jack.
Hello.
Yeah.
It's nice to meet you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you too.
Yeah.
Rebecca said maybe we would want to talk with each other, and I'm curious how you know her.
So Rebecca and I actually were on a set together a few weeks back, and I was just talking about acting, and she brought you up and said that we should meet and that we'd probably have long conversations over coffee, was the exact description.
That's so cool. Like a film set?
Yeah, film set.
What kind of film?
That one in particular, we were just extras in a background. I think it was just some kind of rom-com drama.
Is that the type that you usually do, or like what sorts of films are your norm?
The ones that I prefer are more action oriented. I really love fighting. I do stunts, and so I
You
love action
stunts?
films. Yeah, I do. I do. It's a lot of fun.
That is so cool. I've always
You.
wondered when I watch action films, like how people actually do those. Like, what is it like
Mm.
doing stunts? Is it scary?
It can be. I do a lot of hand to hand combat. I have friends who do more of the high falls. The high falls terrify me, but I really love like the hand to hand combat or like the shot reactions. It's a lot of fun, and like it's a lot of movement practice. You get people from a lot of people from the martial arts and say parkour world end up in stunts.
So is it something that like you always wanted to do, or did you get into that over time? Like, what was your process with it?
Actually, no, I went to school for dance. Yeah, I went to school for dance. I wanted to do like live contemporary immersive theater pieces. And then the pandemic hit right after I graduated.
Got it. Yeah. I didn't end up going to school or doing the thing that I studied in school either. So I think I find it really interesting what path people take and how we end up in a way
Yeah.
place than we started in.
What if you had gone to school, what would you have gone to school for?
Oh goodness. Well, I went to school for humanities, so I
Hmm.
studied kind of generally. And honestly, if I went back to school, I'd really want to study research,
What would you want to research?
psychology, for sure.
Ooh. I
If
think
you
that's
went back,
something. What?
oh, go on.
I was going to say that's what Rebecca was noting on because I was telling her about different acting styles and how a lot of acting is really just understanding psychology and then being able to like drop yourself in and notice things that your subconscious usually doesn't see. So I started on a tangent. And that's when she actually brought you up and said that we should meet.
Yeah, I would love to know more about how you use psychology on set. So we'll pause here. Can we get some snaps for the Saras? All right. So what are some of the things you noticed? I'm seeing some comments in chat. Does anyone want to raise a hand and say anything aloud? I can read some
I
of
noticed
these.
that the two of you were genuinely engaged in each other. I saw interest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was finding things in what she said that I was actually interested in. So I
Right.
was guiding the conversation towards like that last question. It was like, oh, I actually want to know. It could be useful for my work and life to know how she uses psychology on a film set. So I'm figuring out where my interest is. Daniel, you have something?
Yeah, I noticed that there was a moment where you had stopped digging and being curious about her and you identified something that you related with and you kind of switched to your experience with that similar thing. In this case, it was, oh yeah, I also went to school and didn't end up doing what I went to school for, opening the door for her to then start getting curious about you.
Yes. Yeah, so that was deliberate, and we'll talk about in a minute this idea that I call the 70-30 rule of when to share in conversation. But if you're only ever asking questions, oftentimes the other person starts to feel uncomfortable. They're a little bit on the spot. So sharing about yourself opens the door for them to ask questions. It also takes the attention off enough so they don't feel like you're invulnerable. John, what do you got?
Um, I just noticed that the conversation was interesting. When you guys stopped, I sort of had an awe. I wanted to see where this goes. So what you guys, what were, if it was interesting for us listening who didn't have any dog in the fight, is probably even more engaging for you folks. And so that worked.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Yeah, and Sarah Jack was very animated, so she was playing along. But I'm generally able to do this even with someone that's not engaged, because when you find something that they want to talk about and you want to ask about, most people are engaged and light up. Anything else you guys want to say?
Can I respond to one of the comments?
Yeah, please.
So one of the comments says your engagement was 0 to 60 in like a second. And how does one warm up for such acceleration? I think for me personally, okay, it really depends on if I've eaten or not. Often tend to warm up to people more often not when they have an interest in me. So there's like little bits that warm up. So I'm the kind of person who can just like really warm up to people. And it sometimes takes a conscious effort to do that. And then there are days where I'm just like, it is like a brick wall and you will not get to me. And on those days, Sarah's like, hi, have you eaten yet? Or there's some other thing going on. But it takes trust to open up, because someone else commented like you're showing your belly, and it's taking trust for someone else to be in space with you. So that's being like just opening, and Sarah, you can speak more to that, doesn't always come naturally, and doesn't come naturally every day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite anxious in new social situations, so there's going to be a lot more ums in my questioning. I'm asking questions a little bit slower. It's taking me a little while to think about it. Sometimes I'll actually pause and I'll be like, I'm curious about something, but I want to find the question. Can you give me a minute? Because my mind's just blank. You can also notice, like, if Sarah Jack is low energy because I know her, sometimes I'll just be like, hey, you seem low energy, or like you don't really want to answer questions today. Is that true? Okay, let's just go logistical. I'm seeing the question of, was this staged or was it just on the spot? We did a little run through earlier just to make sure that we kind of knew what we were doing. And I kept the same starting question, but the conversation went in a really different direction. So it wasn't scripted or rehearsed, or it wasn't scripted, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go a little bit and continue going into some of these other skills if I can figure out where my presentation went. Give me a second here. My computer is being slow. Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Is that coming through?
I think it froze. Sarah, if you need me to share, I can also share.
Yeah.
It's here. We see it.
Huzzah! Okay. I live in the country and my internet sometimes sucks. All right. So the 70-30 rule, this is something that I made up, but it feels generally true, that when you're in a new acquaintanceship or a conversation, I tend to listen about 70% of the time and ask questions about 70% and speak about 30%. And that's just how I start the conversation. Now, over time, you're going to become a lot more 50-50. You saw the way that Sarah Jack and I fell into that. But I want some information about the person's life to know what to ask about. I start logistical until I find something that I'm really interested in. So maybe I ask about their work and their family and the person that we knew and their favorite color before I find something that I actually want to go into. And then I'm asking deeper questions about it, because people like sharing about themselves. But I am also sharing at least 30% of the time. I'm giving them a little bit about myself. I'm pinging off what they're saying. I'm not monologuing. I'm not stealing the conversation, but I'm giving enough space that there's something for them to respond to. many of us start conversations by sharing something about ourselves, which is also a completely realistic way to do it because it gives the other person something to go down. And to be honest, I will vary this sometimes over time. If the other person is not asking me any questions, I'll start proactively sharing a little bit more about myself. Because if people are talking about themselves, I've found that oftentimes they're actually expecting me to say something about myself in return. They're expecting me to interrupt or share something proactively. They're not just trying to hog the whole conversation. They actually feel kind of dropped if all I do is listen or all I do is ask questions. My husband's community is like this, and they actually felt like I wasn't willing to let them know me because I didn't share proactively. So if you are someone that leads with questions, make sure that you're leaning into the edge of sharing something about yourself. And the other thing is to follow a thread. I was asking about something specific in Sarah Jack. And if I ask those divergent questions at the beginning, it's so I find something that I can drill down on. And then there was a point where the thread naturally changed, right? I started asking about psychology because she gave me an into that. And that was the thread that I was really interested in following. So you can diverge. But if you ask questions all over the place, if you're like, what's your favorite color? And by the way, do you have any pets? And what type of pets do you have? And like, where did you grow up? The other person, you kind of never get anywhere. You've drilled a whole bunch of holes and you haven't followed any of them down because it takes people a while to warm up to their topic. And it's at those deeper levels that you oftentimes find the deeper commonalities. So how do you tell, what do you do if one of you is bored? I will ask some of these questions. I will go back to a previous thread. So I kind of rarely go fully divergent, though sometimes I do. And I'll say like, hey, a while back you mentioned this. I'd actually really like to hear more about it. Or could you say a little bit more about your relationship with your brother? And by the way, I'll oftentimes share a little bit of why I'm asking that. Be like, could you share a little bit more about your relationship with your brother? Because I'm still developing mine and we've gotten closer recently and I really want to know how yours developed. Or I could go divergent. I could be like, actually, you know what I'm really curious about? I really want to know, Sarah Jack, about, well, what was something I did want to know about her that was divergent? I want to know more about how you know Rebecca. So that would be down a different thread, but I am hearkening back to something she said. Or you could just go totally divergent. Oh my gosh, look, an aardvark, and run away from the conversation. This is a reasonable thing to do. Or semi-reasonable anyways. If you run out of questions, you can just use this, could you say more about, or tell me more about. And then you're going to get more of a story. And once you get more of the story, you have more things to ask about. You're seeking for the threads in conversation as well. All right, let's talk about another concept, which is following the aliveness. Some of your comments in chat harkened back to this, the idea of, oh, there were moments where Sarah Jack lit up and the conversation became more alive as we were talking. Well, something that I was doing is I was actually following some of the moments that she lit up. And by the way, there's a question in chat, is this mostly about one-on-one or bigger group? I'm talking about one-on-one, but this is also a bigger group thing. Little pro tip of something you can do in a bigger group, by the way, if there's a thing that somebody is talking about, especially if they're monologuing about it, and there's a point that you find interesting, go, actually, I would really love to hear what everybody thinks about that. To the group. So that's a way of following thread and interest, even in a group. Oops, sorry, I didn't want to show that just yet. So I would actually love to get an audience that would like to do a little demo with Sarah Jack. Does anyone have an interest? I know this kind of puts people on the spot, and I have not primed someone, just FYI. So this is anyone.
A random volunteer from the audience.
That would like to do a little demo with us. Don't have to have anything prepared.
Flipping through, looking for a
volunteer
hand.
as tribute.
All right. I see.
Is
I
it
see
Benjamin?
I heard Philip first, so
You
let's
heard
go.
Philip first. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna spotlight. I know how to do this. I can tech.
Very nice.
Okay, there we go. Hello, Philip.
Hello.
Hi. How are you
Hey.
today?
Doing great. I am caffeinated and ready for this conversation. How are
I
you?
love that. I love it. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. If I could ask, what's your choice of caffeination?
Some Turkish coffee.
Ooh,
It's
Turkish
del-
coffee.
Yeah, it's delicious.
Oh, that sounds lovely. So one of the questions I like to start off with today is why did you choose to volunteer?
I just felt the spur to action. I was like, I usually don't volunteer for things, so I was just like, oh wait, I just feel the need to do it. So I
Oh,
just
I love that.
did not think about it because usually I overthink it, and then I just was like, okay, let's do this.
Oh my God, that's so much fun. Was it, you say like you felt the spur to action? Did that like, was it a sensation in your body?
Yeah, I was like, oh, my heart's racing. I'm kind of like, oh wait, this is a sign to just do it. Usually I would just run away and like
Really?
point out the squirrel thing, but yeah,
Just run away and point out the squirrel.
yeah.
Oh my God, I love it. Is it usually a squirrel that you'd point out or is it something different?
Usually it's like a tree or some like there's like this really pretty wallpaper, so I'll just like look over and sort of pretend like I'm like looking at it, and then I'll be thinking about like the way that I ran away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you, that's cool. So I had two thought threads come up. Can I pitch them both and you can pick one to follow?
Sure.
Great. So I noticed how you talked about like there was a tree or what's in your atmosphere. And so I have curiosities about if you enjoy being around aesthetic environments. And then there was a moment where you kind of psychoanalyzed yourself. And so I'm like, oh, that could be a fun thread. Is that something you often do?
Yeah. Those are both super interesting.
Just like red or blue? You want the red or blue pill?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm interested in both. I'll go with the visually aesthetic question.
Oh, great.
Just because that's something I've been noticing a lot recently.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I do situate myself in environments where like I notice these things, but also I don't know, they're everywhere when you look for it. Like
Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about just arrangements and design and stuff like that. So
Mm.
which I'm very curious about that like star on your cheek. Is
Oh,
that
it's
deliberate or
yeah, it's an acne patch. I got a really bad dip. And so it's one of those silicone patches that help take care of it. And I think it's just fun that it's a little star sticker.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've never seen one shaped like a star. So
I think it's new. I teach dance, and so I teach like middle school to high school kids, and this is something that I think Gen Z has started doing, where they're just putting stickers on their face to cover their zits instead of a bunch of concealer.
yeah. Have you taught any other age groups for dancing?
I do. I have taught from say like 18-month mommy and me classes to adults learning movement for the first time.
Wow.
So big range, big range.
What's like your favorite group to work with? Who's like the most wild group?
I really enjoy either adult classes or studio classes with high schoolers. And I think that's because they want to be there. When you teach younger students, I used to do after school for a while, and when you teach younger students, they don't always want to be there. They have to be there. And so you're spending so much energy just trying to capture their attention. Do you have any experience working with kids or teaching?
I do. Yeah.
Yay! Thank you. Snaps to both of you. That was a great demo on both ends. Philip, you got skills.
And aesthetic taste.
Yeah.
Right? All right. So, would love to get some comments. What were some of the things you noticed in that conversation between the two? Any things you all want to share in chat or aloud? And I'll ask a more specific question in a minute.
One thing I noticed was that Sarah suggested multiple threads to go down, and then Philip could choose one. I think that was really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a great move. Somebody said it was really interesting that she revealed her internal thoughts. This is a really good thing to do, especially if you're struggling for a question. Something you can just say is like, I know there's something I'm curious about here, but I want a moment to think of what it is. Like, you can reveal what's going on in your brain. And that consent piece was lovely. And Sarah Jack did the 70-30 thing, right? Like, she shared something about herself, and then Philip picked up on it, and then it was a back and forth, and they were finding the conversation that was most interesting to them. Same deep listening, natural progression of conversation.
Sarah, can I actually also speak on the body language someone noted?
Yes.
So I sometimes find, especially when I can see my face and I'm trying to stay engaged, I'll smile a lot. And that when I'm smiling, it gets really hard. And then I start to feel like I'm being fake. And I'm like, okay, what's another way I can show this person I'm engaged? So when I want someone to know I'm paying attention to them, I love leaning in. So I love just leaning in and then coming into their space and finding a position where I'm really just kind of waiting like a puppy. And I know I'm putting my body into it so that my head can be in it. But that's something I find is a soft approach for individuals where I'm just like, hi, like I am here with you and happy to be here. And if you lean in and you find they lean back, sometimes I'll like come back and I'm like, okay, I'll open my body and sit back. But that's so you know that I'm in this bubble with you.
Yeah. Yeah, when it asked if this
Can I
was a
also
learned
comment?
skill. Oh yeah, go ahead.
It was actually interesting for me because on one hand, they were both Sarah and Philip you were both very engaged. I did see a few moments where you guys found like little safe spots that you leaned back to places that you're more comfortable in. Like Philip, like when you were talking about the psychoanalyzing yourself, it felt like it was maybe a place that you're more comfortable to talk about, to sort of put it out there as a thread to follow.
Yeah. Well,
Like
that's actually a good segue.
I found it really interesting, the combination of exploration versus sitting back a bit and going back to some place that you're more comfortable, combining both.
Yes. That's a really good segue to the next thing I wanted to talk about. And Sarah Jack, would you mind actually sharing the presentation? My computer for some reason is being slow and it's hard to
Yes,
move
we'll
back.
pull up.
Okay. So the thing, and I'm seeing one of you, this is a difficult place where you're in a conversation. How do you find a way of like of figuring out what to ask, of shifting the focus, finding what the focus is supposed to be? The way that I oftentimes do this, especially when I'm having trouble finding a question or tracking the conversation, is I look for where someone's animation increases or decreases. And now after that first spike that they had at the beginning, both of their animation decreased a little bit. They weren't doing as like high facial expression and animated voice tone, but you'll still notice differences. There was a cool moment before Sarah Jack offered the two options. The reason she offered the two options, I believe, is that Philip's animation decreased a little bit. She asked the question about, I think it was like the squirrel, and his face stopped moving quite as much. His vocal tone lowered a little bit. He wasn't making quite as much eye contact. Philip, hopefully it's okay that I'm calling you out like this. This is very, very normal thing. And Sarah Jack noticed that. And so she didn't continue going down that thread. And this is oftentimes a really unconscious thing. But she was like, all right, two different options of where to go. Because in that moment, I actually saw her struggling a little bit to find a question. And then she just revealed her thought process. She was like, all right, we've got options here. When you're in a conversation, look for the places that someone's animation is going up a little bit. What is the word they say or the topic they're bringing up that they actually light up a little bit more? They move more, they lean in more, they make more eye contact. These are all signs of interest. If you are someone that has a hard time tracking conversation, like remembering everything somebody says, all you got to do is look for those moments and ask about them. You don't have to remember the whole conversation. Just track a little bit of their nonverbal body language. And you'll notice the change in it. The other thing to note is that someone's animation will often decrease if they hit a topic that they're not comfortable talking about, which they didn't in that conversation. But say you're asking questions about someone's family and it comes around to their dad and their eyes go down a bit and their body movements decrease a little bit, their vocal tone drops. You're like, oh, there's something maybe a little bit vulnerable here. And in that case, even though there's a change in animation, you're going to want to ask for consent before you keep asking. You might say, hey, that actually seems like maybe a little bit of a difficult topic. So do you want to talk about that? Or would you prefer to talk about something else? Consent in conversation, I think, is important so that you're not like bowling over somebody's boundaries. Yeah. So that's one of the ways that I think about this. Okay. And I'm seeing a question in chat is, how can we deal with someone who's not asking for consent? So what do you do if someone's going into a conversation and they're kind of not noticing that you have boundaries? This is a place to practice, to say something like, actually, I don't want to talk about that right now. I've had a couple people do this to me recently. It's really helpful. Anytime you create a wall in conversation, if you say, I don't want to talk about that right now, or I'm not really interested in that topic, make sure that you give a way forward. You say, something I'd like to talk about instead is, or something I'm more curious about is. Conversations get awkward if you don't do the kind of improv yes and, if you don't offer something else for the conversation to move forward. So that's something that I always try to do, even if it takes me a moment. All right. So I want to talk about the fine print of this, which is the ethical use of power. I've already been mentioning consent a little bit in all of this. And I want to talk about this because one of the most common questions I get when teaching this content is this manipulation? Has anyone had that question come up in the back of your brain while we've been talking about this? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. It's influence, yes. Okay, so my answer to this is yes, I do believe this is a form of manipulation. I see manipulation as using power to have someone else do what you want. And conversational control is a form of power. But we are unconsciously manipulating and using power all the time. We're just not usually seeing it. We're over talking in order to keep the enjoyment of having attention on us or to reduce anxiety for ourselves. We're asking questions to make other people like us or get the attention off of ourselves. Sarah Jack, can we go to the next slide? To me, the most ethical way to deal with conversations is to make your power conscious and give others choice. So yeah, ask questions, take the conversation in a direction you're interested in, because you're already going to be doing that on an unconscious level. To make it conscious, you have a lot more choice over it. And you can have those moments of actually recognizing when someone is uncomfortable with a topic or interested in a topic instead of being on autopilot. So a couple ways that you can do this, if you are controlling the conversation or wanting to, I think, Sarah Jack, we're seeing your whole screen. Okay, cool. A couple ways that you can do this. Offer options, leave space, and check in on others' desires. So something Sarah Jack did that was great in that conversation is she said, do you want to go this direction or do you want to go this direction? That's one way you can do it. Another way is to leave space, which is just leave a bit of a pause in the conversation after you finish going down a thread and see if somebody else, if the other person or another person in the group picks up the thread with something they're interested in. And you can also check in on other people's desires. So you can say something like, no need to answer this if you don't, but I'm really curious about what your relationship with your dad is like, if you want to answer that. That's something I say a lot. Or I might say, is this topic still interesting to you? Or is there something else you want to talk about? So those are good Yeah, so those are ways of kind of opening up the space a little if you notice that you've been the one guiding the conversation for a while. And I like Josh's point that maybe manipulation isn't the best word as it implies bad motivations. I'm using that word deliberately because it's the one that we most often get, but I don't really see this as a bad thing. I really see power as something that is never destroyed in a group. It's just moved around. And usually someone is taking it unconsciously or for their own motivations. So really what we're doing here is trying to take power and then distribute it and make a more interesting experience for everybody. Okay. And I'm seeing Erica's question. I feel like saying, is this still interesting or is there something else you want to talk about, is like breaking the magic. I use it a lot. It creates a little bit of a pause in the conversation, sometimes creates a little bit of awkwardness, but usually the other person will pick it up. Or if they don't, you can ask a question. Pauses in conversation, tiny bit of awkwardness for a moment, not always a bad thing. That's what happens whenever you break the flow of conversation, but that's when you get space for something else to come in. Learning to manage our own anxiety about conversation is honestly one of the best conversational tools, and practicing a lot. Awesome. I'm going to take a breath for a second because I'm going fast. All right. We are going to go into a Q&A in a minute. So any of these questions that you've been giving in chat, any other questions you have about deepening conversations or communication, this would be a great time to ask them. And before you do, some of you have been asking questions about, okay, how do I actually, remember this in conversation? How do I use it? It's hard to use these skills without accountability and practice. And to me, that only comes from doing them over time. And that's a thing that can be hard to do on your own. Like, we can write these skills on a piece of paper and try to remember them, but it's difficult, right? So I want to tell you guys about a course that Clear Thinking is supporting that for me was really landmark. I created the course when I was having a lot of trouble with social skills and applying the practices I was learning. Like, I could do them within specific safe containers, and then outside of that, I just couldn't. So I wrote this course and then I went through the entire thing myself, and I noticed it created one of the biggest changes in my communication. And it's called the Authentic Life course, and we're launching it in the next round in about 2 weeks. We've had several hundred students go through it. And Sarah Jack, would you put the slide up again, if you don't mind? We've got a couple. I'm just going to tell you a little about what the course goes through. Sarah Jack put a link in chat, and then we'll go into a Q&A. So topics that we cover in this are very much the things that I found that I most wanted to know in communication. In the first week, we go into what relationships in your life are draining you, what are giving you energy, and how do you have more of the first one and less of the second one. And this gives us a baseline for measuring change. Would you go to the next slide, SJ? Then we're going to go into, what are your values in connection? What are the things that you're actually looking for? Because oftentimes under the surface, there is a thing. I look for learning in conversation. I look for mental engagement. So I'll almost always go towards, well, can you teach me about a thing? Can you tell me more about this? I really want to know how you use psychology in your work. I want to know about the thing that you're interested in, and can you teach me something about it? But that's my bias. And usually we're going for an unconscious bias without seeing it. Or maybe we even just want to be entertained. If we can find out what those values are, we can orient more towards getting the things we want, or being conscious about what we're implicitly asking for. Then we'll go into, how do other people see you? Getting some feedback about the way you show up and what people appreciate, so we can honor those things and do more of them. And then a couple other topics. How do you change the direction of a conversation? How do you do some of the skills we were talking about, speaking what you're noticing and seeing, and then actually shifting the direction? How to make requests and set boundaries, when to actually speak the thing that's in your brain. So it's pretty comprehensive. And you're going to get a whole spreadsheet of assignments and tracking and journals and such, which is called the Change Master 3000. And you'll get example of how I went through all of the exercises. There's a couple ways to take it. There is a 7-week course that you can do with others. That's the one coming up. You can get it self-paced, and you can also do it with coaching if you want someone to work with one-on-one. We've got a bunch of things that people have said about the course. You can read if you want. We'll share this presentation and
That's what I'm talking about, my friend. Well done to show up and crush today's chest and back time. Okay.
It's not on.
I'm going to talk about life motto and team chat. I'll kind of give you an invitation challenge there as we conclude with the guided path.
Sure. Thanks, Igor. Okay. So Sarah Jack's going to put that link in chat again, or you can go ahead and scan this. This is the Clear Thinking link. So it'll get some information back to them. These are the dates that it's coming up. I would love to have some of you in class. I really love learning and teaching these skills. And an ending question for y'all. If we can skip to the next one. What is one new thing that you're taking away that you want to try in your next conversation? And then we'll go into a Q&A. I'd just love to see in chat. What's something you want? Offering options, more awareness, looking out for the 70-30, leaning in to show interest. Yeah, that was a great point, Sarah Jack. Revealing my inner monologue, leaving questions that are draining, looking for learning. Yeah, noticing your bias towards that and actually leaning into it. Paying more attention to body language, following a thread. I don't have to remember everything. I can just prioritize animation. Yeah, there's actually a game that you can play with that. It's one of the authentic relating games where you have a timer, and for like 3 to 5 minutes, one person talks and you just follow animation and just ask about that, or notice it and say, oh, I noticed you leaned forward when you said that, or you seem like you lit up when you said that. Would you tell me more? And oftentimes people are crying within like 2 minutes. It's an amazing skill. Sharing more about myself when I'm asking too many questions.
Oh, what is it called? You said it's some type of AI tool?
Offering multiple threads. Yeah, following aliveness. And I'm seeing a couple questions showing up in chat already. So give about 10 more seconds for you can post in chat, or you can say aloud. Commenting internal feelings.
Yeah, just to be clear,
Tell me
Sara
more.
mentioned a course, not a tool, because someone asked on the chat what's the name of the tool, but it's actually a full course. Just want to clarify that.
Thanks. Yeah, it's called the Authentic Life course, and it's 7 weeks of tools like this: videos, assignments, reflection questions, playing games and doing practices online, being in a triad and actually getting to practice the skills with them. It's really comprehensive. And the self-paced has all the videos and assignments and such as well. I've got a couple questions about how do you end conversations that are not going well. So let's go into a Q&A. Thanks everyone who stuck around. And I'll start with that one. Feel free to put others in chat or raise a hand. Sarah Jack, would you be up for moderating this so I don't have to track everything?
Yes.
You are the best. Okay. How do you end a conversation that you're not interested in anymore? There are a couple ways I do this. I imagine people have all sorts of ways, but let me do a little demo just to see what I do. So Sarah Jack, I'm going to ask you a question, respond in a boring way.
Okay.
Can you tell me a little bit more about about working on horror films? You said something about that.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But interesting.
Long days. Bit of drama.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much for telling me about you. I found the idea of like working on horror films really interesting. So it was a great conversation. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Was there something you're particularly interested about?
That I want to ask more about? Not at the moment. Right now, I actually feel a little bit full up. I'm a little introverted and I notice wanting to spend some time with myself.
Mm.
So I'm gonna go do that. Hope you have a great day.
You too.
So what I did in that I noticed is I found something that I could appreciate in the conversation. I can harken back to something, I can just say, I really appreciated talking to you. So I'm ending it on a little bit of a high note. And I don't even, yeah, and then I can reveal a little bit about myself if I want to say I want to end this conversation. But it's not bad. Like, you are welcome to end conversations. It's okay. Ideally, don't just straight up walk away, but people get the hint. Igor, do you have something?
Yes, I do have a question, and I would love to hear your sort of advice on that. So I have a lazy eye, so it's something people notice when talk to me in the first time. And I always feel like I'm okay talking about that as I'm doing now, but I feel like the other person is not comfortable, but they notice it. And it seems my feeling is that this keep floating and like over the conversation, but no one talks about that. So I'm just curious, like I'm totally comfortable about talking about this, and like I would explain why and make jokes about that. But I feel the other person is not comfortable talking about my lazy eye. So I'm just curious, how do you break this ice? Like how do you go with that? Do you have any advice?
Yeah, that's a great question. This comes up a lot too, like if someone is autistic, for instance, and they know they're going to have different conversational patterns, they have some sort of disability. So I love you bringing it. Oftentimes if it's on my mind, I will just say, like, by the way, I have a lazy eye. I am concentrating on you, even if my eyeballs don't look like I
Oh,
am.
good idea. Yeah.
So I'll out myself, and then I'll leave a bit of a pause. So if they want to ask more, they will, but you've opened the door to them being able to. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Good idea.
Any other questions you're noticing in chat, Sarah Jack? You think
Yingzi had their hand raised, and then I'm dropping questions into our.
Oh, thank you. Yingzi, do you still want to ask a question?
She said in chat she had to leave, so I think she's going.
I have a question actually.
Yeah, go ahead.
I know this whole talk had the premise that you need to start from the small talk and getting to know each other and all of that before going on to the deeper things. But a lot of times, the shallower things like talking about work, even though I love my job, I don't love talking about it. And people are a bit weirded out that I change the subject when they go around that, or maybe other very common topics, like very standard topics. So how do you manipulate around that? How do you move around that?
It sounds like the question is like, how do I share more deeply, even if the other person hasn't asked a question about it?
No, it's more along the likes of people tend to try to get to know you by asking about the standard things and the standard everyday things. And sometimes I just don't feel like going into it, even though it could lead to a deeper conversation, because I've already talked about my job 1,000 times. I've already described it. I've already talked about my whatever 1,000 times. So
Yeah.
how do I not make it either move around it or not not make it look rehearsed, like still make it something new?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will honestly just offer something different. They'll be like, hey, what do you do? Be like, oh, I'm a facilitator, but more of my focus lately has been on research. More of my focus has been on my family. Whatever it is, I'll just give them a different direction to go into. and then they'll usually follow
Okay.
that.
Okay. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm seeing a couple others. I think I saw a couple comments on how do I stop myself from oversharing. So I'll answer my thoughts on that one, and then Connor, I see your hand up. Gosh, I get into this. One thing I want to say is on developing awareness. A lot of these tools are, you're not going to be able to do them right away. It's just going to be getting your awareness a little bit faster every time. It's one reason we do a course on it, because it can be hard to get that awareness without support. But if you can, after a conversation, reflect on it and go, did that go the way I wanted to? Was there a moment I felt like I kind of got out of control and started oversharing? What was that moment? If you reflect on it, you'll be able to get closer and closer to getting to a point in conversation. What I am sometimes able to do now is I'll notice myself talking a mile a minute, and then I'll be like, okay, I notice I've just said a lot, and I just want to pause and hear what someone else's thought on this is. Okay. Can you guys hear me, or did I lose
Yep,
everyone?
you're back. You froze for a moment.
Great. Yeah, so I've gotten to the point where I can do that after about like maybe 30 seconds now. I get an awareness of it, and that's just been reflecting on the conversation and then practicing it. You can also have something I do with my husband is I have an agreement that if one of us is like going off on a topic, the other just puts their hand on our knee. It's like, hey, you're kind of going on. Stop, check in, see if the other person, with my husband, wants to know the actual chemical reaction that happens in alcoholic ice cream or whatever thing he's hyper focusing on at the time. So you can have other people give you signals. On Zoom calls when I'm teaching, the signal is this, which is bring it to the moment. I ask all my co-facilitators to do that. I tell my class, hey, I tend to geek out on things. I'm going to have the research behind it. Just go like this if you're no longer interested. Because you sometimes need other people to remind you. So that is how I do it.
We
Sorry,
have a
Jackie,
hand raised.
Okay.
Connor?
Yeah, thanks very much for the this workshop so far. It's been great, and I really like that thing you just shared. I really love one-to-one interactions. Like, I just love them. I really enjoy generally talking to people one-to-one. I find I have more challenge in group situations where sometimes a group of people, the conversation might kind of drift off into very familiar, kind of repetitive things. And there might be even one member who's like over talking. And it somehow feels more challenging in those situations, to me at least, to like, yeah, steer the conversation in like a more interesting direction. Especially, yeah, just because there's like, more people involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's absolutely true. A little bit of theory I think about on this. I think of most things in terms of power and status, because it's just the underpinning to most of what's happening. Whenever somebody is talking a lot in a conversation, or whenever someone has a lot of the attention, they are the one with the power in the conversation. So it can feel very awkward to step in and try to take that power. And oftentimes that's the resistance we feel. We're like, oh, I'm kind of changing the conversational norm here. And it's almost like you have to break past a sheet of ice in order to do it. So the first thing I would say is like, you can practice that. It's going to be awkward for a minute if you're like, hey, I actually have a question that I wanted to ask. So find something you're interested, find a topic, ask a question, or say, actually, I have a thought on that, and share about it and see what it instigates in the group. So a lot of these tools are also relevant for that. Let's see, what are other ways that I do it? I like group questions, so that's oftentimes what I'll go for. Sometimes I will turn to someone else in the group and start a conversation if it's not super awkward. Sometimes I'll create a little bit of a pattern interrupt Like I'll move my body, I'll go get a drink and then come back. So I feel like I can engage a little bit. I can shake off whatever's going on for me. Sometimes I'll grab a guitar so I'm entertained. Any of those feel like they would work, or ideas that come up hearing it?
Yeah, actually, that's actually quite valuable. Yeah, because I actually have in my mind a particular situation, just like fresh, and like I could imagine those being actually quite applicable. And I like, yeah, I like the idea of leaving the situation and coming back, because I can imagine that putting myself in a different kind of state of body or state of mind, actually, to change interaction patterns. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes another thing that happens is we kind of get outside ourselves in conversation. We're like focused on the group and we're not actually focused on how we're feeling or what we want. We know that we're a little bit disconnected, but we don't actually know why. We don't actually know what's going on inside ourselves. And so we get frozen. So anything that you can do to put some more attention on your experience, your desires, walking away and then coming back is a good way to do that because you're out of the situation. But even in the moment, you can come back a little bit to yourself, and you'll find that you have a lot more optionality if you do that.
Thanks very much.
Sarah, we've got another hand up, and then I've noticed also we have a lot of questions asking about protecting energy. So like when you're wanting to connect with someone who is an energy drainer, or you're stuck in a conversation with someone who is an energy vampire. So we've got 2 hands up, and then I also saw a lot of questions about energy.
Okay, let me answer that, and then I'll get to the hands. Energy and conversation. So how do you protect your energy? Can you give me one of the more specific ones, Sarah Jack, so I can, because there's a lot of different places that could go.
Absolutely. So 2 I see is how can an introvert stand their own ground in a conversation with an extrovert without depleting much energy? And then there's another one where someone is trying to connect and keep in connection with a family member, but find that they're energetically draining.
Okay. So starting with the first one, you're an introvert, you're in conversation with an extrovert. They're going a mile a minute. Start having a little bit more pause in the conversation. Forcibly slow it down. Before you answer a question, go, let me think about that. Or wait a minute before responding. The other person is setting the pace and you're kind of allowing them to. And you can change the pace by speaking more slowly, by leaving more pauses, and usually the other person will start to follow. We tend to mirror each other. So even if you want to get closer to someone or understand them better, you can even mirror their body language a little bit. Sarah Jack was even saying this earlier, that if somebody leans back, sometimes she'll lean back. And you can use this to change a flow of a conversation. If you want it to go differently, set a different cadence and the other person will mirror you, because unconsciously we're usually following each other. And don't, it's okay to walk away from conversations when you feel complete with them. Just use one of the completers, like, I've really appreciated this, and I feel like I need a little bit of time to myself, so I'm going to go do that. Some of this has to do with that actually coming back to yourself and paying attention to your own body, so you're not so external. Evit or Evit, do you have oh, I'm sorry, there was a second part of that question. The energy vampire, right? How do you do it if you're in a conversation with a family member that's doing that?
Yeah, like if you're trying to keep up connection with a family member, but you find it's consistently draining.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, let me think of. There's a lot of different ways that could happen. I don't have an immediate answer to that beyond the things that I said. So I think I'll come back later if I have an answer, but I would just use many of those same tools. Like, hey, I'm noticing we're going, I would name sometimes what's happening in like a neutral way. Hey, I notice we're going a little bit fast and I'm losing the thread of conversation. Can we slow down? Or hey, I'm really appreciating the thread we're going on, and I'm struggling a little, and I notice that I really want to know, giving a little different direction, or like, I really want you to ask me some questions. I want to tell you about my life. Would you be open to doing that? Again, a hard thing to practice, but noticing and naming what's going on, asking for something different. Okay. Evit or Evit, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name correctly.
Evet, that is correct. Thank you. Hi. I wanted to ask a question. You briefly touched on this topic when you talked about consent. I am wondering, sometimes I get in situations where the person is doing the first kind of question where it's a very basic question, very lighthearted, not too deep. And I can tell that they just want to find new information to go into the deeper conversation, but I actually don't want to answer that. Uh, like the same thing for work, but like I don't know, in a situation where I don't know, it might go into a topic where I feel like I would not be safe. And I am wondering if you have any advice on setting boundaries in situations where you're not that close at all. Like I understand where, for example, if you're asked about your relationship with your father, it's very appropriate to say, you know what, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with this topic. Let's talk about something else. But if someone asks you how you are and you answer, I'm not sure I want to talk about this, this seems very rejecting. How do you reject people lightly if you actually want to talk to them, just not on this topic?
Totally. Yeah. I hear you. Sometimes I run into that wall as well. Either I think the conversation is going to go down a line that's boring, or I'm like kind of triggered on it today. Um, I'll oftentimes do that, like stop this thread and offer another way forward. So I might say, actually, it's a question I don't really want to answer today, but I would love to I'm happy to tell you about like what my work has been like today. Or I'd love to hear what your answer to it is. I'd be happy to listen. People are surprisingly okay with I actually like don't really want to talk about that right now, even without um a reason for it. But they get uncomfortable if you don't give a potential next action, whether it's a question back or a new conversational thread. Does that help?
I see. Yeah, I think so. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I do. Suvi, and then we'll get Tyson. You still want to ask a question, Suvi?
They dropped it in the chat.
Yeah.
I can read it.
Okay.
How to encourage the other person to ask questions about my stuff, in addition to sharing something myself to give them chances to ask about my stuff. I'm asking for other ways than directly saying, I'd like to be asked a question. Oh, I feel that. The situation is the same age cousin, and they are possibly not so used to asking questions. The default in the relationship has been kind of a 90-10% of them sharing and me asking about them. And nowadays I share more about my stuff, but longing to receive questions or interaction about what's going on in my life.
Yeah. I like it's, I mean, you're already moving in one direction, I think is really good, which is just sharing more about yourself. Sometimes talking a little bit faster with people like this, being a little bit more willing to interrupt. Sometimes it's just a dynamic that someone finds hard to change. It's what they've learned and kind of that's their default. You can ask for questions. It's a little awkward, but sometimes it works. You can also have a deck of question cards that you like. Say, hey, like, I'd love us each to pull one and answer them. There's a lot of good apps for that now. If you want to be a little more direct about it, you could even be like, I learned this new game the other day about asking questions, and it's just like setting a timer for 5 minutes, and then I get to ask you whatever I want, and you can answer or not. And then when the time is up, we switch and you can ask me whatever you want. It's called the curiosity game. There's sometimes a little more to it, but it's a good way to get a different sort of interaction, and it'll kind of teach a little bit the difference of them noticing what it's like to ask questions. So sometimes I'll throw that into conversation, especially towards the start of a conversation. It can be good. Tyson? You have a question?
Oh, there we go. Gotta unmute myself first. Yes. So I had a question about engaging conversations in regards to conversations that kind of have to happen. So as a parent, I work with my kid's school team to help navigate her special education needs. However, for context, I had to pursue legal means against them because she wasn't making progress. So after that settlement, communication kind of spiraled. So how to rebuild rapport or restart engaging conversation so that we can collaborate is where I'm looking at now, because a lot of my questions go unanswered, and I find that asking them and overanalyzing micro gestures, I'm like, oh, they're on defense. So how do I get around that in a sense? Is where I'm at. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to name that most of the skills we've been talking about are for like relatively regulated conversation.
Yeah.
I actually teach a class called The Art of Difficult Conversations, which
Oh, okay.
we're going to do in the fall. It's up on
Sure.
the website where you can find that, the Authentic Life course. And I think we're going to do a webinar with Clearer Thinking about it in the fall. So I'll try to talk more. But something I sometimes do in those moments where I notice it, like there's an elephant in the room, is I'll literally just say it. I'll be like, hey, I know this is a little awkward. Like we had, like I brought a legal action, and I really want to work with you, and I really value the way that you guys have been trying to work with my kid after this. I know it can't be easy, and I'm sorry for any hurt that this has caused, and I would really love to work with you because I appreciate the way that you teach.
No, I like that. I kept the bottom line up front part of, I know that after the lawsuit, it can be challenging to move forward, but I do want us to be on the same side for for my kid. So I didn't go an apologetic route and say that this was like difficult for all of us, but I was trying to extend the hand and say, like, let's continue to trying to work, in good faith. But it's just, for me, it feels biasly like it's empty promises on their behalf when they say stuff, and then I follow through like, hey, you said this and it didn't happen. What's going on?
Yeah. So one thing is I would just add a little bit of appreciation to that. It helps people
No,
de-escalate.
that makes sense. Coming from a military background, I don't add a lot of appreciation to my speech. I'm very bottom line up front. So I think that's a definite missing piece that I should reflect on.
Yeah, if people are defensive, anything that occurs is a little bit of extending towards them. Because the same team thing is really good, but if someone doesn't feel like you're on the same team, they're taking that a little bit as disingenuous. So if you do something that's like, I'm on your team, basically, like
Jesus.
that's
Yeah, that makes sense.
a good way to do it. And I hear the difficulty of that situation. If it's at all, I imagine, is some of this in-person conversation? Is it mostly over?
Yeah. This is in person and email actually. And I try to get more face to face to avoid the emails, because when the emails are sent, I don't want to take them in defense mode and say, oh, they're saying this and they didn't say that in person. So I usually try to schedule a phone call, in-person meeting, just so that they can see me and know that I'm not trying to be aggressive, that I want to work with them. But yeah, as an action and content center communicator, what someone says and what they do really matters to me. So I don't really care for time or emotions or rank for that matter. It's more like, just do what you said you would do.
Totally. Yeah, it can be really frustrating. It's different communication styles. And also, if someone is defensive, like oftentimes they're not really wanting to, they're seeing you as an enemy. And sometimes you have to go a little bit more over to their communication style. Something I'll also sometimes say is like, hey, I know you probably have a lot on your plate right now, and this is one more request. I'd love to just know, like, where is it on your priority list? Or is there any way I can?
It's like helping them with your ask in a sense. How can I support you with my ask? That's a good one.
Yeah. Think of it as much as you can from their point of view, and like honor in your communication
Yeah.
probably is, which is tough. I oftentimes have to think of it ahead of time, and it's like, it's frustrating. I'm like, they should just be doing it.
Yeah. Well, I do have a bias against them because it's the third lawsuit, same school district, and in regards to special education. So I do feel like biasly that they can perceive me as I'm against them, but I'm like, I just want to make sure you're doing what you said you would do. And if you don't, then I'd go through the appropriate channels.
Yeah,
But thank you for your suggestions. I appreciate it.
for sure. Yeah. Good job working with it. I know that's tough. Ember, I'm seeing your hand. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too. So I have a question when it comes to someone monologuing. What do you think about, or do you use reflection to maybe help them feel heard so that they can stop whatever is driving them toward this monologue or repetitive statements they might be making?
It depends whether they're triggered or not. If they're upset, that can be a really good method. One of the things that we teach in the difficult conversations course is actually how do you do like validation. Sometimes just mirroring won't really get at it, but being like, oh, I imagine this is really frustrating because, like, extending even a little more in their direction is good. I will also use mirroring in a very tactical way. So let me show you how, if you don't mind me using you as an example.
Sure.
I'll ask you a question and just like start going on and on, okay? Ember, how's your life since the course that you took with us?
Oh my God. Well, I moved to Santa Cruz and I'm really working on getting out of my apartment and being in the community, and I've made a bunch of friends, and I'm actually having people over for weekly gatherings where we're doing authentic relating games, and it's going really well. Thank you for asking. I'm really enjoying talking about this a lot, and that could go on and on. Yeah.
Well, I actually want to make sure that I understand, because there was a bit I was really curious about. You're having people over to do authentic relating games? What sorts of games? What is that like?
Oh, well, it started out as circling, and then yeah.
That was, yeah, thank you. That was perfect. So that's the way I'll sometimes use mirroring. Most people actually, if you start talking over them and repeating some of the last thing they've said, they will actually stop talking. And then they feel heard because you've repeated something they've said, but you can take the conversation in a different direction. Or you can use the, I want to pause. I heard you say, I want to ask about. So I'll use it as a bit of like a tactical diversion to make the other person feel heard enough that I can take it in a different direction without them feeling like I just don't want to know anything about them. Yeah. Got about 5 minutes left for questions. Anything you saw in the comments in chat, Sarah Jack, you think it'd be good to go into? I'm seeing any.
Yeah, something that came up a few times is if those tips would apply for texting, or you have some like, or does it change significantly, or we can apply the same concepts for texting?
For curiosity, sure. Like you won't get the same nonverbal cues, so it can be harder to read. But I'll just find something in what they said that I'm interested in, and I'll ask about that, and I'll keep going down that thread. Finding a thread is really good. With some people, I've even had different conversation platforms or conversation threads for different things. Like I like having a logistical thread for people that I'm working with, and then also a personal thread. So it can be good to kind of keep them separate. And sometimes I'll also do that naming tool. I'll be like, hey, I'm really liking talking to you over text, but I want to have like an in-person conversation. Or hey, I feel like our conversation is like kind of petering out and I want to ask you about something else. So I'll do that. I hope that helps. I don't love talking over text, so I'll just oftentimes be like, hey, would you be down to meet up and talk about this? Because I'm gonna miss my emails or text.
Sarah, this one's popped up a few times, which is these tools and cultural differences.
Oh, I mean, it depends what culture you're talking to. Usually our classes have a pretty wide distribution. There's actually why we have a US EU and an Asia US time zone. And I'd say like all the tools have been useful, but in different proportions for different people. Like when you get to like South American cultures, oftentimes there is a lot more sharing. Even in the US, there's like different amounts of conversational overlap, how normal it is for somebody to interrupt. So to me, it's just a proportion in which you do the tools. It's also a little bit like some countries have more power distance than others. So if you take a country like Japan, talking really openly to teachers or to power and having like a kind of same level conversation is just not as much done. So you might have to go a little bit more into like, hey, can we choose a specific location? You know, is this something like creating a situation in which it's okay to have more informal conversations? This is also a really good tactic if you're dealing with a difficult conversation, to find a safe or a neutral location. But finding out first, like especially if you're going to a new culture, asking questions about the culture, finding someone to interact with from that culture, seeing what their patterns are. Because if you're entering somewhere new, you're going to want to match a little bit of what they do, or at least understand what they do and why, before you ask them to change it. So that's what I found. I have only really done this in the US and Europe. But I found the tools work pretty well, regardless of where you are. Yeah, Swiss Army knife, different approaches work for different people. And also I will say that like in some cultures you have to like, directness is a big thing that varies across cultures. In some cultures, people just want you to say directly, hey, I'm not interested in this. Can we talk about something else? In other cultures, that's really rude. So finding out, like asking some questions up front, even like having a conversation about the relationship. Like, hey, if I'm not interested in a topic, do you want me to tell you that? Do you want me to keep asking questions about it? Like, how do you want me to navigate that? Or especially if I've got, like in a work context, if I've got feedback for you, do you want me to just say it straight out? Do you want me to give it to you in an email? Do you want me to set up a specific time? So navigating those relationships up front, having those conversations will really save you a lot of difficulty later. Or if you run into a roadblock, then having a conversation about it. Hey, the other day, I feel like we kind of got like into a bit of a jam with each other, and it seemed like it happened when I gave you some feedback, and I'm wondering if there's a different way you would have liked me to do that. So debriefing afterwards. It's pretty like, if I could teach everybody one tool, it would be like, you can debrief relationships, you can debrief conversations, you can talk about how is this going and calibrate. I do this all the time in almost every relationship. Sarah Jack and I actually had a conflict late last year where, is it okay if I say?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I felt like she was being kind of abrasive in communications, or like not being as like appreciative or open as usual. And
Because I wasn't.
Yeah, I was starting to come out with all these stories. I was like, maybe she's mad at me. Like, what's going on? Is this going to be our relationship forever? Do we have to stop working together? And then I was like, can we just have a conversation about this? And I was like, yo, I feel like you're being a little bit shorter with me than usual, and I'm having all sorts of stories come up, and I'm like feeling frustrated and kind of hurt. Is there something going on between us?
And I was like, I am being short. I have a traumaversary at this time of year. I have no capacity. I love you. I'll be better in January.
And we also talked about like what specifically was bugging me and what she could do. I was like, yeah, I was like, I just need a little bit of you saying an appreciation for my work. That's working for you. And then I'm open to feedback, or like I need to be able to check in and say, are you mad at me?
Yeah. And also just having that, because we hadn't established that rapport of like being able to be like, hey, are you mad at me? Which is like something I do like with my partner, because I'll have anxiety and sometimes he'll say something passive aggressive and I'm like, are you mad at me? Am I in trouble? Which is kind of dumb, but I'm just like, are you mad at me? And he's like, no. I'm like, okay, great. Like, should I take this personally? Okay, great.
Yeah, my husband is like fairly autistic, and he just doesn't make facial expressions unless he feels like it. And so there's a lot of like, I have to constantly ask him like, are you mad at me, or are you just not making facial expressions again? But I want to double click on that, which is a really good point, which is once you have one of those conversations, you have a norm in relationship that you can have more. So it really opens up a door if you can have one early on. And that's kind of something, Taishan, like we were saying, like if you can name, hey, this is a thing that's going on, can we talk about it? Even having a conversation about that, like it seems like we're at odds. I'd love to just sit down and figure out how we can be more on the same team. people will sometimes people will just be like, I don't want to do that. But sometimes it'll actually clear the air, or you can have a mediated conversation. I do mediations and those are helpful. And then you have an open door where now when things come up, it's easier to just say them. If you can get people to that first conversation.
Meta conversations.
Boop, boop, boop. Okay.
There's one more question, Sarah, if we have the time, about tones.
Yeah.
Vocal tones, affects.
I use tone a bunch. Idamar, can you say more about what your question is about that?
It's when I actually listen from the side for a moment, even throughout the content of the conversation, it seems like there's some musicality of how you speak, of how Sarah Jack speaks, and the musicality interacts with the message you're trying to get across. I was wondering if I know that we don't have a lot of time, if there's any brief place to touch that, or how you use it as a tool, or where does it interact with the things that we've been talking about this in this webinar?
Yeah, great question. Number one, I've taught myself how to have more variability in my tones. Sometimes people seem uninteresting because they talk in a monotone like this, even though what they're saying is actually I actually have this trouble when I'm telling stories. I go into a little bit of a monotone and I'm not very interesting to listen to, and it's made me think I'm a bad storyteller. When actually I think it's not slowing down and using different tones when I'm talking, using a little more animation, going up a bit more. That variation keeps people engaged. Another thing you can do is tone matching. This is a really good technique we teach when somebody is really angry. If we try to take a regulated tone, they oftentimes feel condescended to. So a way to do it is don't get angry, but go at the same intensity. Like, yeah, I get that you're really angry. And then you can lower your tone a little bit once they've matched you, and that'll actually help them come down. So matching what the other person's tone is will sometimes have them feel really seen. And if you bring a little more energy, the conversation will oftentimes get more energized. So you can raise your affect, which isn't just vocal tone. It can also be animation in your face. It can be speaking a little more with your hands. It can be leaning in. That will bring more energy to the conversation. Or if you have someone with a lot of energy and you want to decrease the animation, you can sit back a little more, give a little more pauses, lower your vocal tone a little bit. The last thing I'll say about vocal tone, women especially are really prone to answering questions on an up note. Like, I really want to give you this information. I went down because I'm in a power position right now, but let me think of one that's not a question. Yeah, this is a really difficult thing for me, and I really want you to understand. There's a bit of a questioning tone to my voice. So if you notice yourself doing that, which is especially in situations of unsafety, try to answer, like, end your sentences on an even or a lower vocal tone, because it has you seem a little bit more, it'll have you feel more settled in yourself, and it has you seem a little bit more direct.
That's really cool. Thank you. That's a lot of insight and a lot of condensed insight.
Yeah, there's, oh man, so much with tone. Okay, guys, I know we said we'd end here, and I could continue talking about this all day because I'm a total nerd. I will put my information in chat. Feel free to reach out if you have anything that you want coaching on some of this, if you want to just nerd out. As I said, my email time response can be terrible, but I promise I will get back to you. Please double ping me if need be. And this was lovely. I hope to see many of you again soon.
Thank you very much for a wonderful webinar.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. I'd love if you could, if you're on, just unmute for a second and say goodbye as you leave.
Later.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.